Feeling behind financially is one of the most common and least understood money problems. What makes it dangerous is that it doesn't care about your actual numbers. You can be saving, you can be investing, you can be objectively doing fine, and still feel like you're losing. That feeling doesn't come from your bank account, it comes from your brain. And once it takes hold, it quietly distorts every financial decision you make. Let's start with something uncomfortable. Feeling behind financially is not a signal that you are behind. It's a signal that your brain is comparing. The human brain is a comparison machine. For most of history, comparison was about survival. Who had more food? Who had more protection? Who had higher status in the group? Falling behind meant risk. That wiring still exists today, but the environment has changed. Instead of comparing yourself to a small group, you're now comparing yourself to thousands of people, most of whom you don't know, and most of whom are selectively showing their best moments. Your brain doesn't understand that context. It just sees evidence. Evidence that others are running more, saving faster, investing earlier, living better. And your brain translates that into one message. You're falling behind, even when you're not. This is where financial psychology becomes more powerful than financial advice, because no spreadsheet can fix a comparison problem. Here's what usually happens next. Once you feel behind, your time horizon shrinks. Long-term plans suddenly feel too slow. Patience feels irresponsible. Consistency feels weak. Your brain wants to catch up, and catching up is an emotional goal, not a financial one. This is how people drift into decisions they never planned to make. Riskier investments, lifestyle inflation, spending to signal progress, chasing returns instead of building stability. Not because it makes sense, but because it relieves the emotional discomfort of feeling behind. That relief is temporary. The consequences are not. Another reason this feeling is so persistent is something called relative progress. Your brain doesn't measure progress in isolation, it measures it relative to others. So even if your situation improves, the feeling doesn't go away if others appear to be improving faster. This creates a moving finish line. No matter how far you go, the sense of not enough follows. This is why people with very different incomes can feel the exact same financial anxiety. It's not about the number, it's about the narrative. And the narrative your brain creates is heavily influenced by what you see. Social media amplifies this to an extreme degree. You're constantly exposed to curated success. New cars, new investments, early retirement stories, overnight wins. Your brain doesn't see the full picture. It doesn't see debt. It doesn't see risk. It doesn't see luck. It just sees outcomes. And it assumes those outcomes are normal. This resets your internal baseline. What used to feel like success now feels like failure. And once your baseline shifts, satisfaction becomes almost impossible. Let's talk about identity for a moment. Many people tie their self-worth to financial progress, not consciously, but emotionally. So when progress feels slow, it doesn't just feel frustrating, it feels personal, like a reflection of competence, discipline, intelligence. This is why feeling behind financially can trigger shame. And shame is one of the most powerful drivers of bad decisions. When people feel ashamed, they either hide or overcompensate. They avoid looking at their finances, or they take aggressive actions to fix the feeling quickly. Neither leads to better outcomes. Another factor is milestone pressure. Society has unspoken timelines. By this age, you should earn this much. By this stage, you should own this. By now, you should be further ahead. These milestones are arbitrary, but the brain treats them as rules. When you miss them, the brain assumes something is wrong. even if the milestones were never realistic in the first place. Even if your life circumstances are different. Even if the economy changed. The brain doesn't care. It just sees a missed checkpoint. And missed checkpoints create urgency. Urgency kills patience. Now here's the most important insight. Feeling behind financially often causes people to abandon the exact behaviors that would help them most. They stop being consistent. They stop thinking long-term. They stop trusting slow progress. They start reacting. And reaction is almost always expensive. The people who build wealth are not the ones who never feel behind. They're the ones who don't let that feeling control their behavior. They understand that progress is uneven, that timelines differ, that comparison is noise. They measure progress against their own past, not someone else's highlight reel. This doesn't mean ignoring ambition. It means anchoring ambition to reality instead of emotion. The moment you realize that feeling behind is a psychological state, not a financial one, you gain leverage. You stop asking, "How do I catch up?" and start asking, "Why do I feel this pressure right now?" That question changes everything. Because once you understand the source of the feeling, you don't need to obey it. You can acknowledge it without acting on it. And that's where control begins. Progress becomes quieter, slower, less visible, but also more sustainable. In the next video, I'll explain how one specific psychological bias turns comparison into panic and why it pushes people to make the worst financial decisions right when patience matters most. Once you see it, you'll realize that feeling behind was never the real problem. Reacting to it was.
Another reason this feeling is so hard to shake is because your brain doesn't measure progress linearly. It measures it emotionally. If progress feels slow, it feels like no progress at all. If progress isn't visible, it feels like failure. This is especially true in finance because most meaningful progress is invisible. Savings grow quietly. Investments compound silently. Good decisions often look boring. Meanwhile, bad decisions are loud. They come with excitement, urgency, and stories. Your brain mistakes noise for movement. So even when you're doing the right things, saving consistently, avoiding unnecessary risk, staying patient, it can feel like nothing is happening. And when nothing feels like it's happening, the brain assumes something is wrong. This is where impatience creeps in. Impatience is not about time, it's about discomfort. It's the discomfort of trusting a process without immediate validation. Most people are not impatient because they want more. They're impatient because they want reassurance. They want proof they're on the right path. And when that proof doesn't arrive quickly, comparison fills the gap. You start looking sideways instead of forward. You stop asking, "Am I better than I was last year?" and start asking, "Why are they so far ahead?" That shift is subtle but destructive. Because once comparison becomes the measuring stick, progress is no longer under your control. There will always be someone earning more, investing earlier, taking bigger risks, getting luckier outcomes. Your brain treats these exceptions as expectations, and expectations are dangerous. They turn normal timelines into perceived failure. Another overlooked factor is that modern life compresses perceived time. You see years of someone else's progress in a few seconds. Your brain doesn't register the years, it registers the result. So you feel late, even if you're not, even if you're exactly where you should be given your circumstances. This creates a false sense of urgency, and urgency leads to shortcuts. Shortcuts in finance are almost always expensive. They come with higher risk, higher stress, and higher regret. But they feel justified when you believe you're behind. This is why people abandon stable plans for aggressive ones, not because they changed their goals, but because their emotions changed. Feeling behind turns patience into a liability, and that's a lie your brain tells you. Patience is not the reason people fall behind. Impatience is. Let's talk about something deeper now. Feeling behind financially often has nothing to do with money at all. It's about control. Money is one of the few areas where people believe progress should be visible, measurable, and continuous. When it isn't, it triggers a sense of helplessness, and the brain hates helplessness, so it looks for ways to regain control. Spending gives control. Risk-taking gives control. Changing plans gives control. Consistency feels passive. Passivity feels powerless. But this is another illusion. Consistency is not passive, it's deliberate restraint. And restraint is psychologically demanding. It requires you to tolerate the feeling that you could be doing more, but choosing not to. That choice feels uncomfortable in a world that rewards visible action. This is why people who are actually doing well financially often don't feel successful. Their progress doesn't match the emotional narrative they've been taught to expect. They expected excitement, they expected milestones, they expected confidence. Instead, they get quiet progress and lingering doubt. And doubt invites comparison. Another thing that fuels this feeling is hindsight distortion. When you look back, everything feels obvious. I should have started earlier. I should have taken that opportunity. I should have known. But hindsight removes uncertainty. It edits out fear, lack of information, and risk. Your past decisions were made under uncertainty, not clarity. Judging them with today's information creates unnecessary self-criticism, and self-criticism feeds the feeling of being behind, because it frames your current position as a mistake instead of a result. Here's a powerful reframe. You are not behind. You are simply earlier in your timeline than your expectations assumed. Expectations are often inherited, not chosen. They come from culture, peers, media, and selective success stories. Once you recognize that, the pressure loosens. You stop trying to catch up to a fictional benchmark, and you start focusing on direction instead of speed. Direction matters more than pace. Slow progress in the right direction beats fast movement in the wrong one, always. The people who escape this constant sense of being behind do one critical thing differently. They separate self-worth from financial velocity. They don't measure their value by how fast things are happening. They measure it by how aligned their behavior is with their long-term goals. That shift is subtle, but life-changing. It turns waiting into strategy. It turns boredom into discipline. It turns quiet progress into confidence. When you stop demanding emotional rewards for money, money stops controlling your emotions. And that's when the feeling of being behind starts to fade. Not because everything suddenly speeds up, but because you stop chasing an imaginary finish line. In the next video, I'll explain why the brain reacts so violently to uncertainty around money, and how that reaction quietly pushes people to sabotage progress right before it compounds. Once you understand that reaction, you'll finally see why feeling behind was never a financial problem, it was a psychological one. And psychology is something you can learn to work with, not fight against.